Hello from snowy New York. Today I'm feeling called to talk about why isolation is kind of like unavoidable after a spiritual awakening, aka hermit mode. I'm sure a lot of people have heard it referred to in that way. My name is Crystal Hoban, aka Crystal Clear Mystic. And when you have a spiritual awakening, right? You kind of have this extreme expansion of consciousness that occurs during the spiritual awakening. And so there's just an inability to really discern well. So be able to tell like what's meant for you, what's not meant for you, what's real compared to what's not real, because of that extensive exp- expansion of consciousness. It's really difficult to be able to recognize like what feels good, what doesn't feel like everything just feels completely and utterly overwhelming. Okay, it is like all of a sudden you are so sensitive. And I mean, like sensitive to energy, like you're picking up on energetic things around you that other people just don't see or feel. You are like so sensitive emotionally as well. So, like certain things that maybe wouldn't have bothered you before are like right in front of your face. You're kind of all over emotionally. Like one of the things about a spiritual awakening is that like you're really not emotionally grounded right after it happens. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of like doing work to be able to get yourself back grounded into the reality of life. And I'm sure one thing you've probably seen is that some people really struggle to get there and some people don't get back to that place. And so they very much are like on this place of like too spiritual and too much on that edge. And then there's the other people who are way too practical and like fall completely back into the matrix. Like that medium in between is always the goal, but getting there is so much easier said than done. Like so much easier said than done. Because after a spiritual awakening, you are now it's like the blinders are pulled off. Okay, like I'm seeing like a horse with those blind, they're pulled off. Everything that you ignored, everything that you performed in, everything that you saw one way is now completely in your view. There is no more ignoring the negative comments that people are making towards you. There's no more ignoring how you truly feel about something or in certain situations. There's no more pretending and performing to fit in or to like make certain relationships work. And the reality is probably most of us do that in general, if we're being honest with each other. Like performance is probably how a lot of people get through life. And after a spiritual awakening, those things are kind of stripped away from you. You can't do that in the same way you could before without extreme discomfort. And it's to the point where, like, you will do anything to avoid having to feel that discomfort. So, a lot of the people after they have a spiritual awakening, they start to see how imbalanced their relationships have been. They start to see where they were taken advantage of. They start to see where they're being used in relationships. They start to see where things were not what they thought they were or what they imagined them to be in certain relationships. Like I said, the blinders are just pulled and ripped off. And it is uncomfortable, it is completely overwhelming and it's really hard to navigate, especially in the beginning stages of it. And so a lot of people will start to isolate themselves. They will start to push other people away, especially people who have had a lot of trust issues, who have had a lot of abandonment issues, who have really like struggled to have relationships in the past that were like healthy. Those individuals a lot of the time are going to kind of pull themselves into this hermit mode. And the other thing I've been noticing too with people as I work with them more that who are awakening is that they will start to recognize that those relationships are not aligned for them anymore, and they will start to pull themselves into a hermit mode. But the hermit mode is kind of unavoidable. I'm going to put it that way. So, um, when you first awaken, everything is just so overwhelming. There's so many emotions, there's so much happening. It's like zoom, 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 right? And then once the initial awakening calms down a little bit, that's usually when this hermit mode will start to happen, or this like disconnection from our past selves will start to occur. So we'll start to end those friendships, we'll start to distance ourselves, we'll start to kind of like put ourselves into our own little cocoon phase. And the reality is that that cocoon phase is so necessary, and it actually is absolutely needed for you to be able to kind of get through this awakening and do the work that you need to do to be able to come out on the other side stronger. So for you to be able to turn into that beautiful butterfly, you got to turn into mush first. Okay? And so during the time that you're in this kind of like hermit mode is what I'm going to call it, or this isolation phase, right? This is the time where you're starting to kind of really do some inner work and start to acknowledge like who you truly are. What things do you truly enjoy doing? Like, how do you spend your time? What do you enjoy spending your time doing? What do you like to talk to other people about? Like, what do you actually enjoy talking to other people about? Right? Um, what is it that you like want for your life? Like, what is your purpose? What is like the thing that you want to be able to create here? Like, right? Like, there's a lot of really deep work happening in that hermit stage where you're starting to really figure out like, I've been living in this way for a really long time. This isn't truly who I am. You're starting to learn who you truly are on a soul level and how to begin to kind of be true to that as you move through the world. So, may that be in relationships, may that be with career and work, whatever it is, you're starting to really start to form that. And well, before you do that, you have to do a lot of shedding. So there's a lot of shedding of who I used to be, who I thought I was, who I pretended to be, right? That shedding occurs. So then you can really stand in who you are and recognize who you are. What do I need? What do I like? What makes me happy? What brings me joy? Um, what do I do on a daily basis to take care of myself, right? Like that's a lot of the stuff that kind of happens during the hermit mode. And I also feel like from my own experience, there's also a lot of like clarity breakthroughs that you receive as well during that period of time. So, a lot of like realizations you'll have about what you've been putting up with, or realizations about like how you struggle with setting boundaries with other people, or realizations about how you feel like you can't be honest in your relationships because it would ruin them or end them or upset the other person, and you're afraid to upset the other person, right? Like these are some of the shedding things I was referring to, is kind of like these breakthroughs of clarity that you're able to have when you are in hermit mode, that you really can't have in the same way when you're constantly engaged with other people, or when you're constantly like keeping yourself overly busy. There's a downtime that needs to happen for those things to be able to come to the surface, to be realized, and to be integrated and shifted. And, hermit mode for a lot of people can last from 6 months to a year, depending on the person. Um, but during this time, you're doing so much inner work. And the other thing that usually you're doing as well is a lot of like emotional regulation work. So you're learning how to regulate your nervous system. And as you begin to regulate your nervous system and feel calm within your body, then you are able to receive this clarity and these breakthroughs. But one thing that I've recognized is that you cannot receive those breakthroughs and those clarity without regulating your system, because there are certain like information that you need to integrate that are part of your shadow that if you have a dysregulated nervous system and you receive the information at that point in time, you would fall into a shame spiral rather than be able to be compassionate, kind, and loving to yourself and integrate that information in to make the change. So that's kind of the difference, is that when you reach certain levels of understanding about yourself, when you're not regulated and your nervous system is not calm and you don't feel safe in your body, okay? You're going to receive like certain breakthroughs and clarity, and you're going to beat yourself up for it. You're going to shame yourself for it. You're going to get stuck in thought spirals, is something I will call it. You will kind of like mope, I guess is another thing. Like you'll mope around. You'll feel like you can't do anything. You can't do your work. You have to avoid, um, you'll overeat, right? You'll go back to old negative habits. Like if your nervous system is not regulated, those things are going to happen. You're going to get defensive. You're going to be kind of an emotional puddle. Right? Like all of those things are going to happen because your nervous system has to be regulated and safe so that you can emotionally react appropriately and not get lost in the clarity that's coming to you that's meant to be integrated. So, and I said integrated when I meant like you hear something about your shadow that's a really hard truth to swallow, okay? Clarity or breakthrough. And instead of shaming and beating yourself up for it, you have compassion with yourself. You talk gently to yourself. You let yourself feel whatever you need to feel without judgment in that thing coming up. You are able to give space to that and process it and integrate it and acknowledge that it's something that you want to do differently. It's not a part of you to beat yourself up, but to accept and recognize so that you can change it. One thing I talk to people a lot about is like, as soon as you talk shit to a protective part of yourself that really was behaving a certain way as a way to protect you, you close yourself off to being able to heal it, period. As soon as you talk negatively to a part of yourself that reacted a way that maybe you don't feel good about after realizing, right? So this clarity comes through and you're like, "Oh, I should have done this differently." Right? Should is like the worst word for it, but usually that's how it sounds, right? I should have done this or I shouldn't have done that, right? As soon as you judge it and talk to yourself in that way, you're lacking compassion. You're cutting yourself off from being able to change it or integrate it or do the work. And you're causing your inner child to hide because you're saying that there's something wrong with you. You're shaming yourself for your reaction. And part of learning how to integrate your shadow, which is what a lot of it is what's happening in the hermit mode, is learning how to not judge, not be harsh, but see how this was serving you at the time and why and where it was coming from, so that then you can heal that part of yourself. So you can integrate that in that understanding of what needs to be different so that then you can change it. I do have to say though that, this hermit mode or this time of isolation, it is really important that you are disconnected from relationships and from other people and that you do kind of like learn to be with yourself by yourself. And the reasoning is because it's not that you're ending those relationships, but you're kind of learning how you need to be in these relationships in a different way so that they can be successful. And there will come a point in time in your awakening where you're able to recognize what you need to do to truly be open and safe in relationships and what you need. And you'll learn how to communicate that. And then that will reopen these relationships again. But for you to figure out what you need in relationships and how to do that in a safe way and how to regulate the nervous system enough so that you can hear these things and be in that space and hold that and trust yourself through that, that is what hermit mode is for. So When I think about the integration of the shadow, I hear a lot of people say, well, it's just about accepting what you did. Yes, it is. But there's much more that goes into that than just like saying, okay, I see it, whatever, right? Like, you know, for example, one of the things that I had to learn in my awakening is that I struggle to be completely honest in relationships when someone has hurt my feelings. And instead of speaking up and telling them that they hurt my feelings, a lot of the time I will shove it. And then eventually I pile up and I lose my shit. Okay. And so that was like what I needed to learn in hermit mode in my awakening is that why am I not being upfront and honest when my feelings are being hurt? What is it that I'm afraid of? And for a long time, I thought it was that I was afraid of upsetting the other person and being abandoned. And yes, that was a part of it. But it was that I was afraid of upsetting the other person and them abandoning me, and then me not being able to handle that backlash, me not being able to handle that conversation, me not being able to stay calm in that conversation and like not lose my crap. So, I mean, there were a lot of different components associated with it. And a lot of the time, when we like are doing something for a reason, right? There's a lot of reasons. And, trying to protect yourself is usually one of the biggest ones. And so when you can look at a part of your shadow and say, actually, I did that because I needed to do that to protect myself at the time, because I wasn't capable of being able to hear those things, or I wasn't capable of staying calm and regulated to have that conversation, right? That's when you start to have compassion and love for that shadow part and acknowledge it. And that's when integration occurs. That's when you can truly let yourself be sad that you have lived this way for as long as you have, and like understand where it's coming from, but also like recognize that you don't have to do that anymore because now you're regulated. Now you can trust yourself. Now you can trust that you know what you need in relationships and that you will speak up because you can handle the conflict without fear that you will be abandoned, because you know that all you need is you. It's a process. Okay. It's a process that happens over time. And a lot of the bulk of that work happens during hermit mode. It happens during that isolation phase. It happens when we turn into the muck. The Yeah, the butterfly and the cocoon, right? We turn into the muck. A lot of it happens in there. But the realizations of why we're doing something usually goes pretty deep. And so, it's kind of like a spiral. Like we realize one piece of it, we integrate it. We realize another piece of it, we integrate it. We realize another piece, and it just keeps going and going until we finally get to the point where we have broken that karmic pattern. And a lot of the times, these karmic patterns are things that have followed us lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And so they're not easy to break. They're so integrated and they're so like rooted in kind of who we think we are that it's really hard for us to be able to see those things, let alone change them. So I gave a little bit of an explanation of like why hermit mode is necessary. It's also about learning how to love on yourself, learning what you need to take care of yourself so you can fill your own cup and you're not expecting other people to do that for you. Because when you can do that for yourself, then you're not worried about being abandoned because you know that you only need you, right? There's a lot that happens during that hermit mode that is just so important and so necessary for you to truly be able to move through the spiritual awakening and come out different, come out stronger. So I do hope that made sense. And if you if you would like more information about how to do this, you need some help or support, go ahead and take a look at my coaching. It's in my bio. And I wish you all the best. Love and light.